Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Okay, everybody, buckle up. It is episode 26 of the Rich Relationships Podcast with Gil and Renee, and we are back in the studio, and it feels so good to be behind the camera.
Back from in front of the camera.
Yes.
Back in the closet.
Yes. I realize I like both.
Nope, I'd rather be in the closet.
Yes, I know. It was so funny. But
so I know we've been getting some feedback of the show that we did in Atlanta last week, and it's going to be airing all month.
Yes.
And so that was great, but that's not what this show is about.
No, this show is about our relationship with food. The title is You Don't Own Me.
Why did you want to actually do this? But you know what? Let's hold that. Okay. Before we start talking about it, let's just go into the show.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so why did you want to do this? It's a little bit different from what we had not necessarily talked about, but we wanted to actually come with as we going into the holiday season. You know, I think you said something was placed on your heart to do this at this time.
Yes.
So why don't you tell everyone who's listening a little bit about that?
The reason why I thought that this would be very appropriate is because we're at episode 26 and it's November and we're going into the holidays. And one of the relationships that we all share in common is our relationship with food.
Okay.
And it's the one relationship that is extremely hard to understand and navigate and be faithful to and committed to. And it's one of the relationships that I struggle with for a very, very long time. And I kind of vaguely have mentioned it before and talked about it, but
you know what? People don't think they have a relationship with food. Well, I would be willing to say they do, especially around the holidays, especially going into Thanksgiving. But why did you really want to do this about this topic now? Is that because of the holidays?
Well, because I know that the holidays are a time when most people, it can be either extreme. Either it makes you feel really happy or really sad. And I know from my own personal experience that food is the one thing that a lot of us run to. And although we do the podcast and relationships are our heart, I always say that my passion is people's relationship with God, themselves, people, and food. Mm-hmm. Because my certification is in plant-based nutrition, and I have written 2 books about our relationship with food. One of them is showing you how to prepare plant-based meals. And for those of you who don't know it, I actually teach plant-based nutrition. Gil and I are 100% plant-based. There is a difference between being vegan and being plant-based. And the difference is that when you're plant-based, you're eating more whole plant-based foods, and it's not attached to a social agenda, whereas veganism is about just not eating animals. So we are plant-based consumers, which our mission and our purpose is to help people. Not that we don't care about animals, but that's not our primary focus or our primary mission.
But the topic of the show is You Don't Own Me, and
Yes.
We're actually going to be talking a little bit about overcoming your fears, and this is actually highlighted from the book of the small group book that you wrote with Freedom from Food, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're going to be actually talking about, highlighting some segments in there, because it's important from you. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, from what you are talking about, it's important that people come to the root. We always talk about the root of relationships and communication and conflict resolution, all those things that you got to get to the root of things. But you are actually talking about the root of this, you know. So why did you really want to start out with You Don't Own Me?
Well, because I think a lot of times we don't realize the impact and the power that food has in our life. So what I always talk about is that anything that you want to give up and you can't is an addiction. And anything that you give everything up for is your God. And so the reason why I talked about the fear of our relationship with food is because there's a lot of secrecy and there's a lot of shame and there's a lot of misconceptions about it. So I want us to address the fear behind letting people know you have an unhealthy relationship with food, and also the fear of changing. You know, we talked about that last week. We talked about a week before last, because last week we talked about our relationship with money. And initially we said that November was going to be our month. We're going to talk about our relationship with food, but it really is about our appetites, because even money is an appetite. And Tony did a great job talking about us changing our mindset. And so just like to some people, trading and investing is far extreme and weird, so is becoming a plant-based consumer, and so is dealing with this idea and unpacking our relationship with food.
Because one of the things that he said, and that's episode 25, if you want to hear Tony Elion, is from sailor to student. His episode, or his story about how he actually got into investing in those things. But the point I was going towards was how he talked about making drastic changes that you have to make when you, from a financial standpoint, where he still drives the same car, even though he can afford a brand new car and probably pay cash for it. It's the same thing as it pertains to relationship with food, that you have to make some extreme changes. You know, from, like you said, we went plant-based, and that's, to some people, is extreme.
Right. Extreme. And it's funny because a lot of our friends are like, oh my gosh, here she go again. What are they doing?
What's the next thing?
What's going to be the next thing? Well, this is going into our 4th year of being plant-based. And I would have to say that it was the best decision I ever made, because I always explain to people that it's prayer, fasting, and a plant-based lifestyle. And it's a threefold course, so it's never just one thing. And so I was really excited about this time for us to really talk about this and dialogue about it, but also to provide people with some solutions, some calls to actions, even some evaluations for them to kind of say, well, do I have an unhealthy relationship with food? Am I afraid to change? Am I afraid of what people are going to say and what they're going to think? Because those things can be a hindrance to us really growing and changing.
You know, because even in the book, that was actually something you were really, if you decide to get the book and read it, and you can find it on Amazon and all that good stuff, but it's really about your own personal journey.
It is.
That you basically have converted into a small group to help other people. And one of the things that you actually said in there was to discover your power of owning your own choices, so that they don't own you. And that's kind of what this is leading to. So tell them a little bit about that and that mindset.
Well, because for me, for so many years, I dieted. I mean, every October, I would normally start on a diet because my birthday's in December. So I was always overweight. So I was always trying to undo what I did all year in 1 month. And so I felt that helping people to understand that you have to take responsibility. First, you have to come to the awareness that you have a problem. Then you have to accept responsibility for it. And then you have to be willing to get some new information. Try something different, because if you keep trying the same thing, you're going to get the same result. And so that was what this was really all about, was helping me. I know it helped me a lot, tremendously, to really overcome a lot of the issues I had with my relationship with food.
Right. Because each day, and you said it in the book, that there's a battle that actually goes on every single day, and even in this situation, every single meal.
Yes.
You know, that you have to decide every single time what is going to be beneficial for you. But when you say the fear, how does fear tie into somebody's appetite, would you say?
Because a lot of times we don't realize that, although we think, when people, I hear people say, I'm an emotional eater. That's like the canned answer. Everyone says, and they say it with such honesty, and they make it like a proclamation. Well, what's driving you? What is that emotion that's driving you to eat? And it could be anger, it could be shame, it could be fear. And so because fear drives us behind the scenes in so many different directions, I felt like that will be the one we should deal with, because the Bible tells us God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and a sound mind. So helping us to confront that maybe I'm overeating because I'm afraid. Maybe I'm overeating because I'm hurt. Maybe I'm staying in this cycle of eating like everybody else because I'm afraid of what people are going to say.
Right. Is it kind of tied into the why?
Yes.
Why is that important? Why, if I could say it that way, why is that important?
Because when I wrote the first book, the 21 Day Journey Cookbook, it was kind of like what Tony was talking about. I wrote the book because everybody kept asking me questions, and I love that. I could really relate to
Well,
it.
and not from an arrogant standpoint, like you said, you didn't write it for you.
Right.
You wrote it to share with other people, almost to say this is for you all who would read it because you were already doing it.
I'm already practicing it.
Right.
And one of the things that really helped me was understanding that if I don't get a hold on this, if I don't change, then this is going to be something that's going to affect me for the rest of my life. And so dealing with the why is so important, because when I wrote the first book, as far as the 21-Day Journey Cookbook, showing people how.
Right.
Well, how did you do this? How did you overcome your three different autoimmune diseases?
Right.
How did you overcome those? Because I kept showing people how to do it, but then I started realizing that if you show them how to do it, but they don't understand that there's still this underlined unhealthy relationship. So you may in public be eating one way, but in private you're eating another way. So that's what made me really start to deal with Freedom from Food, which was to deal with the addiction, the serial dieting.
Well, people hear the word addiction
and they don't like it.
Yeah, right. So why would you use that word specifically as opposed to something else?
Because, as I stated a few minutes ago, anything that you want to give up and you can't, it is an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk to people and you say, well, I can't give that up. What are the things the addicts say? It's not that they don't want to, that they feel that they can't. And some of the things that we are putting into our bodies create the same response in our brains that cocaine does.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an addiction. When I first wrote this book, when I first started talking about food addiction and serial dieting, it was as if I made that term up and it was in my imagination. But it is clinically a for real entity. It's really going on, but it's just because we look at addicts in such a negative light that we don't want to put ourselves in the same arena with them. But again, it's a different drug, but it's having the same effect.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you said in the book, and I highlighted it here, and just to share with everyone, it's talking about under fear, and it says, we do not have control over the thoughts that come to our minds. However, we are in control of how much and how long we entertain them.
Yes.
You know, why was it, so that kind of goes into what you said about the mind.
Mm-hmm.
You think about it. So how does someone really stop, thinking about something from a food aspect that they really, really, really enjoy?
Well, I understand. That's why I say it's prayer, fasting, and a plant-based lifestyle. The only way to get free from something is to fast it.
Mm-hmm.
I think about when I was, we were younger and I was a shopaholic. I shopped all the time. Every penny we had extra, I spent it. And the way that the Lord showed me to stop doing that was, first of all, a little girl came in the closet and looked in the closet and was like, oh my gosh, Titi Renee, what did you do before you bought all these clothes? How much money did you have
mm-hmm.
before you bought all these clothes? And it just hit me like, oh my gosh. So I fasted. I actually went a whole year where I didn't buy anything, not even socks, not even underwear. And in order to break a relationship with something, we talked about that moderation. Moderation is a trick. Either you do it or you don't. So I had to fast from shopping, and it got me where I knew that I was free from it when I had money and I didn't go and spend it.
Right.
And so it's the same thing with your relationship with food. There are certain foods that you are going to have to break the relationship with it in order for you to have success in that area.
So when you think about the relationship, though, it also kind of leads back to the appetites.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it important for people to really understand the power that appetites have on them as it relates to whether it's food or shopping or
mm-hmm.
anything
or
else?
gambling or
right.
spending, just
Sure.
whatever. A part of it is that the more you give your body, your mind, give into your appetites, the more it has control over you. That's why I talked about you don't own me.
Mm-hmm.
And I put the me in white, and it's like it's fading into the background, because sometimes we don't realize that the things that we think we're in control of, they're really in control of us. if we're spending our extra money on it, if we're thinking about it if you're eating and thinking about food, or if you're preparing a meal, already thinking about the next meal. Those are a part of it. Is you have to kind of change your habits. And that's why, fasting is so healthy for you, because it allows you to have the time to kind of stop and see that food is not, because the Bible says man does not survive on bread alone, but every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So when you fast, you get to really see who you really are. You get to see that, oh my gosh, I've gone this many days and I didn't eat and I didn't die. Mm-hmm. So it really helps you to see how the strength of the human will and the strength of the power of God living on the inside of you and things like that. A lot of times we're afraid of the unknown. Well, what is this going to happen? What's going to, because, we've been told for so many years that you have to have so much protein and you have to have dairy and all these things we've been told that really are fear tactics to drive us to things that our body doesn't have to have. And so a part of breaking that cycle is to do something totally different.
But wouldn't it also, you pray about it, you fast about it and all those things, and those are actionable things that you have to do. But it's also as vitally as important is to understand the why.
Yes. Because a lot of times, if you think about it, you have to educate yourself, and you have to also look at the history. You have to look at the science.
Look at your history.
You have to look at your history, because everyone's body is different. Right. And there are certain things, like for you and I, let's use an example. Like we both are plant-based consumers. You like papaya, you like pineapple.
Right.
And I like papaya. Those are both good for you, but we're different. So there are some things about us that are, even when you become a plant-based consumer, that are not going to change. Certain nuts you like that I don't like, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And so a part of it is just making sure that when you make decisions about what you're putting into your body, that your food is serving you and you're not serving your food. And so with Thanksgiving coming up, one of the things that, I always liked to cook, and I was always good at cooking. And so taking the foods that people already like to eat, rather than telling them what not to eat, telling people what not to do, that doesn't work.
Right.
And so trying to take the things that people already are eating and showing them how to make those same things plant-based. Mm-hmm. And so that's a part of, changing your appetite. Your palate will change when you fast, because when you fast, you go from having nothing to having an apple, and that tastes like the best apple in the world.
Right.
So it goes back to what you break your fast with. And every day we fast. So when you go to bed at night and you wake up, that's a fast. And so what are you breaking your fast with? So our bodies, our minds, our lives want what we give it.
But isn't it just as important that as you get older, some of the things that you didn't, or that you could do when you were younger, you can't do as you get older? And I'm not talking about at our age, which is we're in our 50s, but I'm talking about people who were, you could have been in your teens,
yes,
and now you're in your 20s.
Right.
And you're starting to see that I can't eat pizza at midnight and
right,
get up and just drink a Coke and go on about my business. Is that a part of the understanding or the changing of the appetites and the behaviors that go along with it?
Because a part of it, there are certain things that we have been taught and certain things that we've practiced that have not served us well. So when people say, well, I don't need to change, I don't need to, I don't need to hear anything about that whole plant-based nutrition. I don't need to hear anything about that. But then those same people, they end up with high blood pressure, or they end up with cancer, or they end up with diabetes. Then they're scrambling around trying to get the information. So you're trying to learn on the go versus giving yourself the time to learn it when you don't have to. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important that you make some conscious decisions about, like you said, when you're young, there's things you can do that as you get older, you're not going to be able to do.
Right. And what we're talking about, for everyone who may just jumped in or kind of fast forward through, but we're talking about our appetites, and the title is You Don't Own Me, but it's also overcoming the fears and talking about our appetites that we have as we're getting ready to go into the holiday season.
Right.
That's what we're talking about on the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. And even just in that season of what we're talking about, there's a season that we actually have called Questions, Got Wisdom, Got Questions.
It's that time. It's that time.
So we just going to take a quick pause from the topic and actually talk about some of the questions that we actually got. And if you did hear the last episode, you heard a little bit of a different music in the background at the end of that, and that was by Cicely Mason, who we met in Atlanta on the show that we recorded for Pastor Tracy Wells White.
Yeah.
And so she actually provided the God wisdom for this week.
Wonderful.
So what did you
Cicely.
think about the change that we did with the music?
I love that. Hey, you guys let us know how you like the music, and you guys can leave comments in whichever platform you're listening on, because what we're trying to do is we're really trying to get you guys' feedback. So if you're listening to us on any platform, give us a share, give us a star, give us a like, give us a comment, because as we grow and we want our community to grow, we have to have evidence of that growth. So a lot of you guys are actively listening, but please leave a comment, leave a like, so that we can begin to build our audience in a way that we can
meet the need that they have.
Meet the need that you
because
guys
we
have.
come up with topics, but we would rather have topics that our listeners are actually
things
asking.
you guys want to know.
Right. But the question that she had, I said we got wisdom, got question, but the question that Cicely actually had was, what are the effective ways of communication, and what are great ways to keep marriage fun, loving as believers and as Christians?
Well, the first thing I could think about was one of our first episode is pie destroying your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that liberated me so much in my communication is not being an autobiographical listener,
Mm-hmm.
learning to listen to understand and not to respond. That was, for me, just life-changing. So I think that as you learn to listen to understand, it creates more communication, it makes the other person feel heard, and it actually creates a sense of affection for one another, because if you feel received and you feel heard and you feel wanted, then that can go in all the other areas of your relationship too. So I think that just learning how to be an effective listener, not so much just talking, but learning to listen to hear what the person needs.
Right. And I would say, in reference to that question, is the two things that we kind of always talk about is active listening,
right,
and being assertive in your communication. Now, assertive is not meaning you be aggressive,
right?
Because aggressive and assertive is two different things. A bit in the context of what I'm talking about, assertive communication is with your partner is being able to say what you need,
right,
not talking to them in such a manner that it's confrontational, but being assertive in to say, I need this from you, and being conscious enough to be able to articulate that, because our partners always want to give us what we need, not necessarily what we want all the time. It may not be the same, but it may be what we need, and that's what we want to be. So to piggyback on that, what you said about being heard, but the other one is kind of goes along with effective listening, is being able to hear to be understood. You got to, if you want to hear someone else, what they're trying to communicate to you, you actually have to understand where they're coming from.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to agree with it,
right,
but you should be empathetic towards listening to them and understanding what they're trying to communicate to you. And as believers, you're going to, if that is seasoned with who you are as a believer, it's going to come across in your communication, because that's exactly what we want to do, is always be effective in our communication, but also be effective in our listening as well, as much as we're talking.
And to laugh and have fun.
Right.
To find something to laugh about. Focus on something that the other person did for you that made your day special.
Mm-hmm.
Laugh, touch each other, hug, spend quality time where it's just the two of you.
Right.
Those are the ways you can begin to build a stronger, more intimate personal relationship, because you have to be able to invest the time and your presence and your attention to your spouse.
Right. And I'll just say this as it relates to the God wisdom, it actually came from you. You probably didn't know I was going to do this, but you actually said it already in the quote that you have is, anything that you give up everything for is your God, and anything you want to give up and you can't is an addiction.
Wow.
It's a little bit different when you hear it from yourself.
Yeah,
huh?
and it's so strange to see you holding that book with
Right.
highlighted stuff in it.
See, I actually read your book. So, but if you want to participate with us and come kind of in the studio with us a little bit, you can actually send your questions in at our website that you just updated some pictures. We did a photo shoot, so we updated some pictures on that. It's the richrelationshipsus.com. But if you actually want to send in some information, you can reach us by Gmail at
richrelationshipsus@gmail.com.
and that's got wisdom, got questions. Gil and Renee Beaver's over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships. Now let's go into our show.
So we're actually talking about overcoming fear.
So I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So, because we're both plant-based and this is our journey and our story, what was the scariest part for you about making the transition into a plant-based lifestyle?
It wasn't, I wouldn't say I was fearful, because for me, I see food, I've seen food as a necessity, not something that I really took a whole lot of joy in. You know, there's things that I did like. I'm a open myself up here right now.
Be vulnerable, baby.
Okay.
Come on.
I was addicted to ice cream.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was. But even then, that was something that I just really enjoyed. But as I mentioned earlier, as I got older, I couldn't eat as much ice cream as I liked, not because of the lactose. I wasn't necessarily lactose intolerant, and it seemed like it didn't hit until I got older.
Actually,
everybody is.
Yeah,
Right. So, but for me, to answer your question, it wasn't necessarily fear of missing out on something. It was more of, I think, the variety of things that I was eating diminished greatly.
Right.
Because until you are conscious of it, you don't really realize how many places you go eat that are just have no other options other than, we call it the SAD diet,
Right.
the standard American diet, which is all animal based, whether it's dairy, cheeses, those types of things.
And yes, y'all, butter is an animal product.
Anything that comes from an animal is still an animal-based product,
Yes.
And so that wasn't necessarily, like I said, a fear. It was just something that I became more conscious of. And it did take time, because I had to start replacing. And that's something that I say that you did really well for me, is help me make the transition, because you gave me alternate options for the things that I had already liked that tasted just as good.
Right.
So that transition wasn't very difficult for me. And I tell everyone that that asked me this similar question, is even my coworkers or people that I just meet, they find out that I'm plant-based, because it's not like something I just advertise. They just
Right.
notice it. I just tell them I like the way I feel
Right.
better than the way it tasted.
Right.
So that was the one thing for me that kind of I changed in my mind, but I
Right.
made a conscious effort, and I also paid attention to my appetites,
Right.
as we're talking about right now.
I think about, if I had to think about the funniest thing that's ever happened to us as a result of us making the decision to change our relationship with food and to change our food options, is the question that we get all the time.
Probably you more than me.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
I don't probably get it as much as I used to anymore. But when people would say, "Where do you get your protein?" And I
Right.
just think that is the funniest question.
Why? Well, for those who may not be familiar with it, what's the big deal about it? Why don't you explain it a little bit about the whole protein thing?
Well, because we have been fed this idea that the primary nutrient is protein, and it's not. The primary nutrient is water and fiber.
Okay.
When you say, where do I get my protein? I get my protein from the same places that the animals that you eat are getting their protein, and it's from plants. It's from greenery. And so
It's the greens.
it's the greens. And so why not just cut out the middleman and just go straight
Or
for
the middle animal.
Yeah, the middle animal and just go straight for the greens. And so I think that this is a really important topic, especially like we said, Thanksgiving is coming. You know, people say, oh gosh, well, what do you guys eat for Thanksgiving? I eat all the same things you eat with the exception of the turkey.
Right.
I always say that and I actually have the little post I'm going to put out, we are creating a side menu revolution because we're bringing all the sides to the front.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gil did a great job. We did this last year where we created these little menu, like a recipe cards for all the things that people like to eat. Dressing and macaroni and cheese and greens and yams and
all the traditional things that people are usually accustomed to.
And we made them plant-based. And so really it's just a matter of wrapping your mind around the idea that you don't have to be afraid of changing.
Right.
You don't have to feel that the world is going to end if you stop eating animal products. But if you look at the news and you look at the media, I think about when I first started this and how much pushback I got from people and how now
you can get in a plant-based Whopper.
Yes, you can. And so, you know, I kept telling people plant-based nutrition is the future of personal health care, and we're going to take over the world. So as we're going forward, we begin to realize that this is a reality, y'all. It's not a trend. It's not a fad. It's not going away. And so,
if anything, it's getting more popular.
It is. It's becoming more mainstream because more people are starting to realize that they feel better. You know, and most people fast in January.
I would be willing to say most people are starting to feel better, but businesses and companies are realizing the dollars go where the people are going to spend them. And if people are spending them on plant-based products,
yes,
they're going to start making them.
Yes, because I think about with me, I have celiac, so I can't eat bread and cookies and pasta and all those things.
Right.
Well, when I first found out I had celiac, it was probably, we were in Upper Michigan, and there was like nothing. I mean, basically, I had to read every single thing.
And you don't realize how much wheat is in everything.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it's in everything. It's everywhere. It's in everything. It's
candy.
In candy. It's in things that you would least expect. And so I had to become a student of labels. And so now what I realize is when you eat a plant-based lifestyle, all the foods that are beneficial to you don't have labels, and they don't have, you know, calories on them. And so what I try to explain to people is real simple. I have a very simple philosophy.
And what's that?
To consume the rainbow.
What do you mean by that?
Fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, and seeds. Every color of the rainbow, as far as foods go, have a nutritional value. Purple, red, yellow, orange, green. And I'm not talking about Skittles or Trix. I'm talking about broccoli and cabbage and zucchini and squash, and all those things are different colors. And so a part of it is, and so I tell people to consume the rainbow, but then I also tell them it's like a little simple thing to remember, to eat really slow at a table with other people, mostly rainbow colored plants.
Why those things?
Because most Americans eat really big portions
in the car,
really fast in a car by themselves. And so it goes back to that secret eating that because I think about, for me, I remember when I was at my worst or my highest, or probably my highest weight and my lowest time, I could eat a box of Apple Jacks by myself. And then I would drop the kids off at school, and on the way, I would go to Burger King or a fast food restaurant, and I would get, because I wasn't a burger person for years, but I would eat, you know, and I would eat fries.
Right.
And so the more you eat those foods like that, because they don't have any nutritional value, you feel hungry and you crave it, because the signal that turns your brain off, the need is not met. So therefore, you still eat more and more. So people say, oh my gosh, it's like it's in my head. It is in your head, because the foods that you're eating and consuming are creating an appetite that is unquenchable.
Right. And I think, and you said it in the book, what is causing people to be disconnected from their choices and their decisions?
Because I think we're not we don't realize that the one thing we all have in common, because like with the podcast, it's about relationships. You can be married, you can be single, you can be divorced.
It's still applicable.
But the thing about food, everyone, it touches everyone's life.
Right.
And so that's the thing. Why is that something that we all are connected by has caused such a disconnect? And it's because we are throwing everything else under the bus and not realizing it. It's our appetites and it's our choices and it's our relationship with food.
Right. So as you think about this, you have to think about, do your decisions own you, or do you own the decisions that you make? That's something that you said in the book. I won't take credit for that. That was something that you said.
Yeah, I kind of know.
You know when I'm giving you.
I know when people
work.
using my stuff. Even though they don't give me credit for it, but it's okay. It belongs to the Lord.
So what is something, as we wrapping up and coming to the end of this episode, what is something that you would want to have people take away from this topic of overcoming, or don't let your fear, or don't be owned by your choices and your decisions and your appetites and your fears? What would you want people to start doing?
Well, the one thing I would like for them to do is to be aware that the foods you eat are not just affecting you. They're affecting your health. They're affecting your bottom line. They're affecting your family. They're affecting the legacy that you're going to be able to leave to your family. And so for something to have that big of an influence, maybe we need to be paying more attention to what's going on. Suicide, depression, all of those things. A part of it is the foods we eat, the water we drink, the books we read, the things we watch on television. All of those things are feeding us. And so we just have to make sure that we become a keeper and a guarder of the gates of our heart and our mouth and our appetites, and make decisions about what we're going to put in our body like we do with our cars.
Right. So that's great. That's a great point to be. And we are actually going to be talking about some similar topics to this over the next few weeks for the month of November.
Right.
As we going into the holidays. And then we are just kind of giving you a heads up. We're going to take a couple weeks off for the holidays, like around Christmas time. So we won't be broadcasting during those times.
Yeah, because our anniversary is in December.
Yes,
too.
it is. And there's will be plenty of episodes that somebody told me that they binge listen.
Yes, I've had people tell me that too.
I never would have thought somebody would say they binge listen.
I think that's so awesome.
It is. So, but we're actually going to be bringing some more topics out of Renee's book, Freedom from Food, and you can get it off of Amazon. You just Google her name or just type in her name, and it's going to come up all the 3 books that she's already written. And just to help
if
on
you
the journey.
guys leave a comment in one of the social media or one of the podcast platforms and send me your email address, I will send you a free holiday survival kit with recipes.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to send this to you. That's going to be my gift from our community, from me to our community.
So from us out of our closet, we will see you guys next week on the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.